All right, Michael, these are not cases. These are tiny little Gen 5 SSDs. What's so special about these? Why are we here?
So you're asking me why did I drag you here?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, this is all about Gen 5 SSDs and why waiting a little bit longer maybe is the best way to go for any
How
technology.
much longer?
A lot longer. Before that, I want to thank all of our sponsors for this show. Without them, Computex 2023 coverage wouldn't have been possible. So why am I geeking out over Gen 5 SSDs? There's one main reason for that. It's because in the past, we've seen that these things have massive heat sinks. They look like huge, huge towers, and sometimes they even have active cooling, which is absolutely terrible for anybody who wants to have a silent system.
Gen 5 is cool and all. What's the difference between Gen 4 and Gen 5?
Speeds, baby. It's all about the speeds. Gen 5 has not even been capped out at 14 gigabytes per second, whereas a Gen 4 SSD goes way, way lower than that. So why is cooling so important on Gen 5 SSDs? I mean, it's great to have an SSD running at like 40 degrees, and that's because with the Phison controller, the second it hits a certain temperature, it either throttles or, more importantly, it can cause some very, very serious Windows corruption too. So that's why a lot of these SSD manufacturers were really gun shy and wanted to make sure that they launch with massive, massive heat sinks so you're not getting a controller that's airing out all the time. And that's a major problem that early adopters were going to be facing with these drives, but luckily it seems like Klevv has found a pretty elegant solution. But before I go into the technology behind these things and why this is happening and how that problem is being solved here at Klevv, I did want to talk a little bit about who Klevv is, because you guys probably haven't heard about them, but you probably will in the near future. Basically, what they are is a division under Core, which is in effect a division under the SK brand, so SK Hynix. They have access to some of the best bin chips for their memory and in the future for SSDs as well. But what is the actual problem with current PCIe Gen 5 SSDs? And a lot of it comes down to the heat being produced. And I'm talking about massive amounts of heat being produced by the Phison E26 controller. Wait, I was right. It's E26. I opened the rusty file drawer in my head, it just popped out. It's great. Okay, I got a good blah, 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 blah. The problem with heat in such a condensed space is that it needs to be dissipated somehow. So some manufacturers just said, YOLO, we're going with the absolutely biggest heatsink we possibly can, like MSI, adding a bunch of active cooling and actually having it bash right into your PCIe slots too. It's like they didn't even think about it. Klevv, on the other hand, what they've been doing is they've been holding off on the release of their SSD in order for technology to progress a little bit. So first of all, Phison is actually coming out with new firmware for their SSD right now, or for their controller, to minimize the heat. What they had before was a massive, massive problem. As a matter of fact, we went to an AMD event where they were trying to demo their Gen 5 SSD speeds. They're using not a Klevv SSD, but a different brand's SSD with the Phison controller, and it kept on airing out again and again and again, because of the fact that it was overheating. There just wasn't enough cooling for it, and even that had a massive heatsink. And of course, that probably led to a lot of manufacturers saying, oh my God, we have to add as much heatsink as we can. That prompted a lot of companies to add active cooling in order to be the first to market. But on the flip side of that coin, a lot of those heatsink ended up being like an e-peen contest, right? Everybody wanted the biggest heatsink to make the biggest splash so people talk about their products. Klevv, on the other hand, with the CRAS C950, they've gone for a completely different approach. So look at these things. There's no Titanic heatsink on them. They are small. Now the way Klevv actually did that is just spending a little bit more time on the development, fine-tuning basically their heatsink technology and their thermal pad technology. What they're doing is actually working with Phison to moderate the heat transmitted by their controller at higher speeds. So even though these have small heat sinks, the most important thing you need to know is that they're not taking a massive impact in the overall transfer speeds. We're still looking at up to 12 gigabytes per second reads and 11 gigabytes per second in the writes. So that is actually in line with some of those massive, massive heat sinks that you're seeing in the market. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that Phison does not have an exclusivity on the PCIe Gen 5 controller. So a lot of companies, I'm not saying that Klevv is actually doing this, but just as sort of like a background here, yeah. So the real intent of Klevv here is not to be the first to market or the one with the flashiest heatsink. I mean, look at this. I mean, yes, it does have a sort of like stormtrooper look to it, but it doesn't have a bunch of RGB or anything else. What they want to do is they want to have the right product at the right speeds and take some time to develop it. So while you're going to see Gen 5 SSDs everywhere in the next couple of months, they're actually waiting for around Q3 or maybe even Q4 to launch this thing, just to fine-tune it enough so they can achieve those speeds without having to add any more cooling.
So there are two sizes, Michael.
Yeah,
What's
there
the
are
difference?
absolutely positively nothing. In terms of speeds, both achieve the exact same read and write speeds. The only difference is really the temperatures that they achieve. So the slightly higher one is about 10% lower temperatures, slightly lower one will run a little bit higher, but it doesn't affect the stability in any way. Plus, it's a visual thing, right? They will be launching with the slightly higher one because they think that there's a little bit more market for the slightly larger heatsink. This smaller one, on the other hand, this is probably going to be for people who want just like a little bit more compatibility, a little bit lower price. So that's going to be launching a little bit later.
All right, the new CRAS V memory is awesome. It's running at 8600 mega transfers per second. We're not the elitist at all, without any additional cooling. Michael, why is that important?
It's actually not important.
What?
So let me explain to you why it's not important for Klevv to be running at the highest possible speeds, because we know that there are other kits on the market that are running and will be running higher. So for Klevv right now, they're trying to break into the market. So what they're looking for is absolute stability in order to be backed up by a lifetime warranty. And we know that 8600 mega transfers per second will be achieved through overclocking. But at the same time, the way that they were able to achieve this is something that will lead to their development in the future. And that is the fact that they can pull on SK Hynix for the best bin chips possible, because it's a first party supplier. It's not like they're basically taking whatever is on the market and just shoving it into modules like some other manufacturers do. So for them, it's all about stability. It's all about delivering the best product as they try to expand their lineup and their visibility in the market. The other thing that they have is, of course, like everybody else, very, very low profile modules. We're going to be using these in some ITX builds coming up. So Gen 5 SSDs, what do you think about them? Personally, I can't wait to see if Klevv delivers on what they're promising. And that's basically giving a middle finger to all of the other manufacturers who think it's okay to basically put a massive heatsink and an active cooler on a frickin' SSD of all things. Anyways, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye.